Hi, this is Evgeny. Today we're going to build front-end for our auction application. If you didn't see the previous video, you can check it there. If you're just interested in front-end, you can, since we'll be using this backend, you can download it from my Git and just clone the code and install dependencies, and that's all you need. So I'll be building it using Svelte. Which is a front-end library that compiles code to pure JavaScript, and it runs faster than alternatives like React. Well, why using Svelte? It's first of all, it's minimal and reminds pure JS. It's lightweight as well, and it's fast to write. So to get started, we don't really need to install anything. You have this command here. Open your clone this. Let's call it my app. My auction. Now it will ask what framework you're using. Check Svelte, then regular Svelte, and now cd my auction and run it in VS Code code dot, and it's opened in VS Code. Now in VS Code, go to your extensions, and if you don't have it already, get Svelte for VS Code to get the all nice highlights, so you can see, so you can get your syntax highlighted. Okay, now open the terminal. Let's install dependencies. npm install. We'll also need a couple more things, which is a Svelte navigator. We'll use Svelte navigator for our URL paths, and I usually use Axios as well, but you can use Fetch. It's actually a very small project, so you probably don't even need it. Okay, and here we have several blocks. First of all, the file itself is called .svelte, which is a component, which is a building blocks of the Svelte application. It uses a superset of HTML that is divided into script part, where you write all the JavaScript code, main, which is just HTML, and style, which is where you write your CSS. And now we can run it with the command npm run dev. Now this one isn't compiled. If you want to make it more performant in the end, you have to compile your code. But for developing, you use that command and still works. Here you have some reactive boilerplate, and we don't really need this, so let's get rid of it. Okay. Okay, good. In app.svelte that we have, we will create a page which will lead the user to the auction page. First of all, and we will use routing for that, so let's import router, route and link from Svelte Navigator. Now our application needs to be wrapped in a router so that it has access to routes. And now we'll create a first route, which is path. So it's a home page. and there will be just one which says auction. Let's see. Yes, yeah, it says auction now. And we'll create a link that will, with which we'll be able to go to the specific auction. Okay. To auction, and let's just do one for now. And besides the link, we need to create the actual dynamic route, which will allow us to go to component that we'll create later, the auction component itself, which will create all our logic for application. Dynamic routes is done like that. You pass semicolon and ID. And here we will have our other component, auction, which we will create now. So let's create the auction component, which will be also .svelte. And we can import it right away. We don't have to export anything. And you can see it still works. So we don't even need any exports here. Okay, now let's go to the basics. First, let's create the script tag and think what we need. One thing that we need is to get the actual item when we go to the auction to display what we are selling currently. For that, we will use a variable with the syntax like this, item, which means that, and it will use the function get item that we will also write next. This means that this sets a variable, and this $sign semicolon means that it's reactive. It means that the variable depends on some other variable or action, and it is run immediately before the component updates whenever the values that they depend on have changed. So every time get item is called, our item variable will be changed. We will also have ID of the participant. Let's just of auction actually, and the participant as well. And let's make a current bit as well and set it to 0, and it will also be a reactive one. As you remember from our endpoints, our URL is that way. We pass the ID of auction and then the participant's ID. And for getting the item, we just send the get request to this endpoint, which is auction and ID. So let's create that function that sends it, and it will be asynchronous. So we'll write async function get item. It needs to be awaited, so await keyword. I use Axios. It will be get. Let me install it real quick. Yeah, install Axios. And from Axios, import Axios. And import Axios from Axios. Okay. We're sending it to this URL. And ID will be a variable. So we'll wrap it like we usually do in JavaScript. Okay. And after we get the response, we can set the current bit to the one that we have. And it will be response data item bit. Let's try to see in browser. Let's see in browser what it usually looks like. Okay, actually use just localhost, and let's see how it looks like. The response as item bidder and item description, minimum price, and when it was completed. If it was completed. So as you can see here under item and bid, we will have our bid which is set to null because the auction didn't start and no one used that. So we will send the request there and get the current bid like that. Current bid response data like usual item bid, and every time that get item is called, our current bid will be updated after this. And let's return the response data. Okay, now let's make some HTML to display our item. And if item isn't set, we will use await keyword since we have async function. If it's not set, yet and not defined, you can see it highlights us that we can use syntax await then, and we will use exactly that. So if it's not loaded, we'll just write loading info. Yes. Then after then we will have to write what we're waiting for, and we're waiting for item, and we're waiting for, and we'll write it here as well. So then item, and let's get item auction number 4. And you can see that we have that loading info because we didn't send any request yet. And we're sending request to number 1, which is already finished in my database, but let's try to send to number 4. And you see loading info, and it failed. Should fail. Okay, I forgot to set the port. Okay, our server actually runs on HTTP, not HTTPS. Localhost port 8000. And after you set it that way, now when we load this page with the route that we sent, auction ID, it will load the, we actually need to pass it as prop, which we'll do later, so it can actually read the value, but now we'll just pass it like here. And now we can see that it's loading, and it says painting number 33 from there, because it loaded the response. Let's also write the display the description. It will be also item, but item description. So we have two different scenarios. One is bidding already started, then we have to display the current bid. And if it didn't, then we need to display the initial price so people start bidding and know what the price starts with. So let's do that. It usually uses how you write if statements in Svelte is like that. If not current bid, so if no one set any bids yet, what we'll do is we'll write the starting price. which is what we have every time. So the bidding starts with 7,000 in our case, and it will show this. So else will be written like that, and let's just close it like this. Else, let's see if it works. Starting price is 7,000. Since we have no bits, it displays 7,000 now. Now, if there is a current bid, we need to display the bid. So we'll write current bid is current bid. And let's also display $sign. It's not the syntax for the library, but it's just to show dollars since we're dealing with prices, and it says starting price is 7,000 now. Okay. And if someone will bid, it will show the current bid now. Okay, good. Okay, we also don't want to show some of the data if the auction is finished already. So let's also create is finished boolean and set it to false. It won't be reactive, it will be set when we get the item and we see. Is finished will be sent by our WebSocket. And now let's change something. So if our auction is finished already, it won't say current bid. So if not is finished, then we're saying this way current bid is, else we're saying the last bid was, and just wrap it up. Here actually. Okay. Now if auction has ended already, like our first one did, it will say we need to show to close it here and then show current bid. And it says, okay, first is finished is sent by the WebSocket, and we didn't create the WebSocket yet. We can't see it right now, but we'll see later. Okay, let's, and we'll create a button to set new bid. Will be, and it will be disabled if the auction is finished already. Finished. And on click, it will get a new bid, which is a function that we will create, and say bid and some new bid. Okay, and it's written as on semicolon click. And all other stuff is written as same. On blur, on focus, on drag, just written like that in Svelte. Okay, before we go on and create a new bid function and new bid, we want to create a participant which we will send to our WebSocket and open a WebSocket. So let's create a const participant, which will be just randomly generated number between 1 and 100. Let's say we use math random for that, and math random returns a random floating point between 0 and 1, So we'll multiply that by 100 and use the math floor to round it down to the nearest integer and add ones to start with number 1, not 0. And it will just be participant ID. Also, let's declare variable for auction end time. Auction ends. As we can remember, we had two types of messages that we were sending on our WebSocket. Some of them were just regular messages and some of them were JSONs. And JSON contained new price and the date where it ends. So we need to distinguish between those messages when we're receiving them, and for it we will create a small helper function that will see if it's actually JSON or just regular string. So it will take a string and we'll use try json.parse string. If it can do that, then it will just return that it's true, otherwise we'll catch the error and return false. Return false, else it will be true. So we can use it to see if the incoming WebSocket message is a JSON. So let's finally create our WebSocket. So const new WebSocket and auction variable ID ws prefix and the participant number which we just created. It will be created when someone connects to this page, and it will just refer to him at that number from now on. So it will create a WebSocket when we open the page. And now let's make a on message, which will await for our messages and read them. Okay. First of all, incoming message is event.data. Now we'll see if it's a JSON string that was sent. If it is JSON string incoming, then we'll do one thing, else we'll do something else. Okay, what we want to do if it's a JSON string, it basically means that the bit was sent and the auction end time updated. So we'll just update both of these. We will parse the incoming message then as JSON parse. Then we will see if there is a new price in the message. Incoming new price. And if it's there, then we're updating the coming new price. And auction end time, I send a string, so we'll need to make it a date. We'll use new date and just write incoming ends, just like we send it here, ends and string date. Otherwise, it's just a message that says that something has been said, and we need to show the messages that auction is sending. And for it, we need to create an array and change it. And to change component state and trigger a render, we usually assign a locally declared variable like this. But since Svelte reactivity is based on assignments, when we assign something like that, it becomes reactive. Using array methods like push, like when we do that, won't actually trigger the reassignment. And we can do something else for it, which is use a thing that is called store instead. And store isn't a local variable like this one that are just accessible to this component. They are global, more like React's Redux, if you're familiar with that. And it's pretty simple to actually create a store. So let's just create a store.js, and it's just done like that. Import writable from Svelte store. And when we want to make something, we need to export it, and it will be, in our case, we'll make last messages. So let's do last messages, and it's just writable, and we pass the array in there. It's all we need to do to so now this is a store instance that will get updated every time when we import it and subscribe to its updates, which is done automatically actually. So now in here we can import it, and now we can just extend this array of messages every time that we're receiving a message which is not a JSON. And to access the store variable, we need to use a $sign in front of it every time. So $sign last messages is, and we'll use the spread syntax again, last messages, so we're taking what was there before and just extended by incoming, which is our new message. And that's all we need to do basically. And now let's show those messages to participants and write something, some code for it. So let's make it div. And in React, you usually use map, but here and view you use v4, and here you use syntax which says each, and we're iterating over last messages. Each last message has message, and we will just display heading message, and it actually should be like that. So yeah, every time it will show here. And let's also greet our participant when he enters the site. So welcome participant number, and it's in our participant variable. Okay, let's look. Welcome participant number 74. Okay, great. Doesn't look so pretty now, but we will write some styles later. So we put our button here to bid, but we actually need to know how much we can bid. And for that, we need to create a function. As you remember, our bid can be only higher than the current one by a price step. So we need to create a function that will be calculating the bid, and it will be a reactive variable as well. New bid. and it will take the current bit and item as input parameters. Okay, now let's create get new bit. Item current bit. Since we can both have a situation when we don't have any current bits, then our item's minimum price is the minimum allowed. If we already have some bits, then it will be different. So let's do that. So we'll return item, then since our item is promise, we'll use the then here, and let's just do new bit. We'll set new bit just here. No, make a new bit which will be a maximum of either item's minimum price or current bit, and and by default current bit is 0, so either which one of these is larger, this one will work. And we will increment it by the price step of current item price step. Actually get minimum bit will be a better name for it. And I named it wrongly. Now do camel case, and it will actually work after that. Now let's see if it all works. And as you can see, it already says bit 7,900, so it calculated that there is no current minimum price, and price step is 718. So it incremented, and it knows that the price needs to be that. Okay, here's actually a small mistake. If the price, if no one ever bid, then we start with the minimum price, not the incremented one. So let's change that. Since it's expression, we can just use the syntax to see if current bit exists, and if it does, then we increment it by price step, otherwise we don't. Finally, okay, it will be make, not get. Let's finally make the make new bit function. We'll just send through WebSocket the data that we get from get min bit. Since we already can see how much we need to send, we'll send this data on our WebSocket bit and our new bit. And let's just send it with send data. Okay, since I had that little flaw in my minimum bit logic, we also need to change something on backend as well, which is minimum bit. It should be the same as item minimum price, and here will be minimum price less or equals new bit, otherwise it won't work. Okay, and after that restart, and we can finally try to send new bits. Okay, so we're connected, connection is done, and we got the current bit, and you see our server broadcasted the message that participant 69 has bid. And let's when new person comes in, it tells him that auction already started, and it tells him he can bid 7,900, and he bid that, and now we can just do it back and forth. Now, great, we're lacking just several things. Well, some more nice design for that, and some other logic. Let's implement that. First, let's make our styles. So let's wrap it all in container, and it will be container, it will be flex. Oh, very useless. Justify self center, flex direction column, and max height is 100%. And all that will be in div. Div. Now indent that. Set our class to container. Let's look how it changed. It changed already. Now let's make a grid in one, so we will separate the messages and the item description by grid into columns. So instead of main, let's just do another div class. Call it grid. Here it will be also div, and now let's make the grid. So display grid will have some gap, and grid template columns will be, well, we can go to auto or 50%, 50%. I guess it will be the same in this case. Okay, now we see it already did something. So this container should end here, and now it's separated into two columns. Great. Now let's add some image. Now let's look here. Great. We can make it a little smaller. And let's add some border so it looks like it's some gallery. Fix black. See how it looks. Great. Looks better already. Let's also make description a little different looking. Let's just make it dark. And great. It works now. We have all the messages incoming here. But there is couple more things. First of all, this auction already ended. If we will update, we will see that it's already finished, but we still can bid. So, and it says it was sold to bidder 94. But we will need to make it unavailable to bid if it has finished already. Or how do we know that the auction has already finished? Well, our WebSockets tells us, and we have that completed here. And it says in database and it sends that information. So we need to react when the WebSocket is sending that information. So here our on message, we will add one more condition. When we get, then we set is finished our variable to coming JSON data completed. And we already can't set the bid anymore. Now I just said that auction has already finished. The variable was successfully updated. And we can't bid anymore. It just says how high it sold for. And one more thing that we might want to do. Only thing left for our application is to add a countdown so everyone knows when auction is finished. So how can we make it in JavaScript? First, let's create const countdown. It will be an arrow function, and we will have a new variable which will be also called countdown, and it will be a reactive variable because it will depend on this the auction ends variable. So every time auction ends, every time when auction ends is updated, which is when we get a new WebSocket message and we get a new one, the countdown will also be updated, and a new date will be new date returns current date and the time now in milliseconds, and auction ends is also the same in milliseconds for when it ends. We usually send 60 seconds from now. So we will just divide it by 1000 to get seconds, and we will we'll define the interval for our countdown function. Interval will hold the countdown itself, so we can reset it. So it will just look if our countdown variable is countdown is larger than 0, then it will just decrease it by 1 second. So -1 count down. And if it's less than a second or a second, we will just stop it and clear interval. Clear interval and interval. It stops the countdown, and we'll set it to 0 so that it doesn't show strange values. Now let's actually run the countdown. So when we get an incoming new price, and we first we will clear the already existing timer, otherwise it will set several ones, and we don't need that. So first we're clearing the interval that exists, and then we're setting a new one. It will be a set interval. It will be a set interval, which is a JavaScript thing. And it will use our countdown function. And the interval is 1000 milliseconds. So every 1000 milliseconds, the countdown function is running, and it looks at our variable and decreases it by 1 second. If the time has run out, it stops. If the time ran out, it stops the countdown by resetting the interval and setting countdown to 0. So now let's display this data. Okay. So if countdown is over 0, variable not function is bigger than 0. Okay, let's close if. We will write auction is ending in countdown. Else it means that auction has ended already. So we'll just say auction ended. Now let me go to our finished auction number 4, and we'll see that auction ended here. And it still shows the auction ended, but it's because we actually need to add one more check. We will check if auction ends exists overall. And we can do it that way. If not, auction ends, then we do all that. And now we don't see that. So what we're checking is if that auction ends was set, because now we're just defining it. But if auction didn't start, then we don't have this value defined. And what we're checking if this is actually there. And we use isNaN because it can, because sometimes we can get the result now value there, just not auction ends won't do. Now when time ran out, it showed that auction ended, but we can still, it showed like we can still bid, because we also, when time runs out, we need to set is finished to true as well. After that it will be fine. Yes. Also, it might show some very large numbers, so let's also use toFix to round it down to one number. And it should be sure not big countdown, but countdown of the variable. So okay, now let's try to use it our auction. So we'll create several participants, number 16, 14, 46. It's so, and now you can see our countdown is working and it updates the values. If we bid the new one, then it resets it, and the auction is ending in 53 seconds now, and everyone participating sees that. So to be clear, where this JSON data is coming from is we're sending to personal message, and it has that JSON data and completed that true. If we find that the auction ended already, so that the participant can't get the data and won't be able to participate in the auction. In our app.svelte, put the link and say like go to auction 1. And now we can proceed to here. Now to make the ID in our route actually dynamic, we can do it this way. Instead of auction here, we pass auction as a component straight to the route. And now this will be accessible, this ID will be accessible in the component if we import use params from Svelte Navigator, then use that hook, use params, and our ID will be in params.id. So we will have params $, don't forget that, .id will be our new ID. Now let's check if it still works. Go to auction 1, and it says this one has already finished. Now let's look what it sent. Yes, and it actually sent to auction 1. If we do link to auction 2, it is sending link to auction 2. Okay, good. Now I added some auctions endpoint that will send us all available auctions, and we will call it on our main page, so we can look through the incoming messages. So we can look through auctions and show all of the auctions. So we can look through our auctions and show them on the main page and display where you can go. Socket. So in script we'll set, but we'll modify the auctions. We'll just go to straight to auctions. Okay, let's do like auctions. Now let's loop through it and make new links. So use each syntax again. And this endpoint is sending all this data, and we have it as ID here. We have ID just as ID. So we'll do that. Dot ID. Here will be also ID. Let's also import X, yes. Now we'll also need to wait for it. Oh. Functions. And auctions. And we got it, but it doesn't look very nice because it's not inline. Yes, we can just actually make it a paragraph. And we have all our auctions here. Now it's auction 9 and it's new one. 7 and new one. We can also add some styles. Make it a card look and div. Make it class card. Then we will also show if it's completed. Completed. Okay, it says it's finished. True. So our previous grid won't work here because it's a local one. So we can make it like a 4-column grid. And also let's make a small margin here. And so we have it. Now we have our page with auction. It will dynamically go to different kind of auctions. We can start our different bits with different participants. So this one be this one be this, and it all works. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. Leave a comment what you think about Svelte and which front-end libraries you prefer yourself. If this content is interesting about front-end or if I should just stick to the backend. So thank you for watching.